It's really my pleasure to be here and my delight to see how much LaborX has matured to this point. So I want to first and foremost just thank Innovate for putting this together, making this happen. This is a big deal. A big achievement she's been working on for years, I can attest to that, and it takes a tireless persistence, and we're all in that space right now. So I just want to acknowledge that this is a time of a lot of work and a lot of headwinds, as somebody in my life likes to say a lot. This is a time where I think that there can be amazing creativity that kind of leapfrogs where we've been for a long time. And at the same time, and so trying to kind of keep a pace and look for those opportunities for creativity and for taking this to the next level is really important. At the same time, with so much coming at us, it can be hard and it can be tiring and it can be exhausting. And I want to acknowledge that we've got to, really think about multiple marathons and not just a sprint. And so I'm assuming kind of most of us in this room are probably people who are up for that big challenge. And I just want to say thank you for being here and doing that work. So we are here today to start talking about the future of work. And that's an endlessly exciting topic to me personally. I have been in the area of education, creating educational opportunities and employment opportunities for people for over 25 years. So really this is my life's work in different fashions. And I think that's probably true for everyone up here on the panel. We have committed our lives in different ways to creating opportunities for success for people, and that's a big deal. So what we're going to do is, just to give you a lay of the land, I'm going to ask people to introduce themselves and talk about the organizations that they work with. I also want to acknowledge that a lot of us work with so many different types of organizations. It's hard to say I just represent such and such, but anyhow, whatever the work is and how we're doing it, please, I'll ask the panelists to go ahead and introduce themselves and talk about that. They're going to respond to some of the questions that I'm going to frame, and then also we're going to make sure that there's some time for you all to ask us questions, because I want to make sure that you get the information you guys need to continue your work. And so I will ask you, just by show of hands quickly, how many of you are representing companies that are trying to access more prepared talent? Okay, great. And then how many of you are working with training organizations preparing people for talent? Preparing people for opportunities. Great, thank you. Okay, so that's helpful just to know who's in the room. So I'm going to start by saying, so in my current incarnation and job, I am working as Iskaida said, with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and I have two primary roles. The first and foremost is that I run a portfolio we call solutions. So we're looking at the supply side of what kinds of training programs, what kinds of technologies, what kinds of practices are going to help people obtain the skills and knowledge to participate in the knowledge-based economy by the year 2025. And so we do big grants and we do investments we do social investments, program-related investments, mission-related investments to help create that kind of supply. We also do a lot of work with colleges and universities to help them avail themselves of these kinds of new technologies, new interventions, new solutions. So that's what I do in my day job the majority of the time. I also am on the advisory group for Melinda Gates's Pivotal Ventures, which is going to be a very large fund investing in women-founded and co-founded companies, primarily tech companies. And so we are thinking a lot about diversity and inclusion and the future and what that really looks like. And it's we all have different definitions. We all come at the work very differently. And so it's been a great opportunity to see from different vantage points how businesses think about this work, how nonprofit training organizations think about it, how philanthropists think about it, and what was true even 5 years ago, definitely 10 years ago, I think is is changing a lot, is evolving right now, and especially in the education space where I spend the majority of my time, we're seeing that the whole industry and sector is being turned over. The publishers that dominated the industry and prevented a lot of innovation, frankly, are dying right now. And so the question emerges like, well, who's going to take their place and how's that going to happen? It's a very interesting time for all of this to be emerging. And we've had economists at the foundation say, project that by the year 2025, there will be a gap in the number of 11 million people who don't have the appropriate credentials to participate in a knowledge-based economy and to be able to earn a living wage and thrive. And I actually think that that's a severe underestimation, not to be too paranoid and doomsday on you, but we just see, I had a big learning session with my team 2 days ago about deep learning and the power of artificial intelligence. And when you see just one technology like that is so incredibly evolutionary and changing, revolutionary in the ways that we work, I can't help but think that that kind of exponential impact actually really does disenfranchise even more people than we're anticipating. So those numbers are kind of constant if you just look at credentials and you just look how many people complete college and what, but you don't, if you look at all the people who really had jobs that were, I'll just take one example. I have family who are based in Oklahoma, Mississippi, and our previous generation, those people who came up as adults worked at factories, and they actually had really sound, good jobs with pensions, and there was a thriving community there. Now if you go to Oklahoma, the main street looks like a dust town, like those little Western movies with the tumbleweeds coming through, and older people are, trying to hold on to what pensions they had and on SSI, and if you are young and you were born there, really you have to leave in order to access opportunities. And I think unless we find ways of getting more of the training, more of the work opportunities distributed, we're going to see more of that rather than less of it. We see from the educational perspective, community colleges, there are many of there are over 1,000 community colleges that are in rural communities that serve something like 700 students each or something, who are in jeopardy of having to close down because there aren't the proper resources to train and prepare people for work opportunities. And so just the compounding effect of the lack of resources of real-time information becomes very stark. And at the same time, we do see that technologies can maybe to change the trajectory. So in response to these institutions that don't have the proper labs to train people, we'll see technologies like virtual reality that come in, and you can have affordable devices where people can really access the training, but you can have enough of the physical experience as well as the content experience to be prepared and have the skills to be able to participate if the jobs are in your community. Because at the end of the day, although a lot of the high-tech work is virtualized, there is a lot of what happens around work and opportunities that is a very regional situation between training, education, and work. So I think for all of us trying to figure out how can we, well, at least the foundation, we look at a high level and then we try to regionalize opportunities for closing these gaps, or experimenting and exploring to find new solves, and then how do we scale those. And it's another level of conversation, I think, but also what's scalable in terms of even solutions. So what we're going to do, what we have the opportunity to do today, is to also talk about this region and what's happening in the Bay Area. And so I've got with us on this panel, with me on the panel, are people who are working in this region and others and can share with us their perspectives of where they're seeing the divides in work opportunities, and also where there are new solutions coming available to us. So I would love for us just to get it started off. Please introduce yourself, what organizations you're working with, and how you see the issue presenting itself right now. I think we start there, and then we can talk about how we're all trying to take on the challenges. So, Kat, would you like to start us off?
Sure. My name is Kat Taylor. I'm one of the co-founders and co-CEOs of Beneficial State Bank, a triple bottom line bank owned by a nonprofit. It's our aim to change the category of banking because we need to change the banking system for good. We are imbued, our DNA is all about working in the public interest, and so we have to take a very broad view of what banking is. It's not finance to us, it's community, state, and nation building. And we need to increase people's social and political capital at the same time that we run a financial network. Just for instance, our Fresno branch was a polling place in the last election cycle and hosted 222 ballots. We're now just under $1 billion in assets, 17 branch offices in 3 West Coast states, 225 colleagues, including our colleagues at Beneficial State Foundation, which owns 100% of the economic rights of the bank. And we run 2 aligned venture funds alongside the bank because the new advanced energy economy that's fully inclusive, racially and gender just, and environmentally restorative will be populated by a lot of new startup activities, and that's not an appropriate use of bank finance. So we are also trying to change the category of venture. Venture has been a real source of exclusion in our economy. And we take some pretty broad views that seem outside the purview of banking and venture, but one of the first is that capital has been whooping up on labor for a long time, and at the end of the day, labor is people. So we need to right the balance of power in the economy. We also pursue diversity and inclusion proactively. If you don't choose it, you don't get it. We are very privileged to have worked with LaborX already. We've actually hired a person off the LaborX platform.
Yay!
And I will say that hire came, the decision maker in that hire was frustrated in the candidates that she had seen from conventional headhunting sources. And the first candidate she saw at LaborX was the match made in heaven. Maybe that doesn't always happen, but just saying.
And it came from year up. If I can plug year up, it was a year of graduate.
Oh yes, she was a year of graduate, yeah. And you probably will see her profile at some point over the anyway. So we run a diversity inclusion committee as one of the working groups of the bank. We measure ourselves on this and many other metrics. We're a B corporation, we're a community development financial institution. We adhere to a lot of third-party assessments of how we're showing up as an American company, but diversity and inclusion is a really strong one. And our thesis is that now is the time at long last for us to put more and different people in charge of the economy that drives so many important societal outcomes, and to change the development paradigm and the economy and the way we organize to models that are first and fundamentally based on equity. So that's, I think, enough of an introduction.
Hi, all. Patrick Mitchell. I'll go way back. So my parents met at San Francisco State University back in the early 70s, and by the time I came around, my parents were in Colorado, and so I made the journey back to San Francisco about 15 years ago, and went to San Francisco State, and now I met my wife here, and now we have a 2-year-old and one on the way, which could happen any minute. So like,
Get out of here.
Yeah.
No problem.
Apologies in advance. So I've been working in this field for about 12 years now, and I actually started in the mission in a nonprofit called Mission Hiring Hall, and I've been working for the city of San Francisco for almost 10 years now. And my focuses have been in developing sector strategies, and so creating opportunities for access and transformational employment opportunities for individuals in construction and healthcare and hospitality and in tech. And in the last 5 years, that has been my focus in tech. The TechSF initiative is something that is really trying to address this opportunity divide. So the three main pillars, as it were, are to address the talent skills gap locally, to do what we can. There's a lot to do. We're chipping away. The second thing is to create opportunity and access through the entire workforce system. So the Office of Economic and Workforce Development, where TechSF resides, oversees the local workforce system, which is about 6,000 individuals per year who are looking for training, employment opportunities, and we have 52 programs that we invest in, with about give or take on a given year, 13 to 15 million investment directly into education, training, and primarily community-based organizations doing a lot of good work. And the third pillar of TechSF is to create educational pathways. And so a lot of the work that we do is with the San Francisco Unified School District and with the City College of San Francisco. And it really takes all three of those things to try to address this holistically, and it's still not enough. And kind of going into the opportunity or the maybe trends that we're seeing. So we're actually in a really good place. So if you look at unemployment, we're at about 2.7%, I think, which is unheard of, the lowest since 1999, and it's because of tech here, where other areas of the United States have seen a slowdown or not as much of a recovery. It's because of the automation of jobs, and that is actually a positive for the Bay Area, because all of the companies that are automating are here. We're also seeing a change in how individuals are going into self-employment and the gig economies, the sharing economy. That cluster of companies is here in the Bay Area, and tech jobs come out of that, and software development, and all that support in those that are part of a company, and actually something like 12% of the jobs in San Francisco are in tech. So it's actually a great opportunity when we're seeing these changes to have initiatives like TechSF, and to work with organizations like Bay Area Veto Coalition in Europe and others, to train individuals and help them get into tech, which is wholly transformational, with an average of at least the programs that we invest in, $32 an hour, and going from half of our participants that come into the program making less than $25,000 a year. That's huge. And in addition to TechSF, the one other piece I work on for the city is our gig navigation efforts, and so addressing the burgeoning gig economy, and helping individuals who are looking to find experience and exposure to industries that they may be interested in, and using gigs in the platform economy to actually get experience to earn while they're in training to move into careers. So there's a lot of change happening, but I think what the city is seeing is that there's really an opportunity through tech, through gigs, and if we are, applying, the right solutions, there's actually quite a lot of opportunities with the Friends.
Thank you. Jay, maybe you can build upon what kind of Europe has been doing for quite some time to bridge the divide and get young people into those opportunities.
Sure, yeah, happy to do that. And good morning. Thank you for coming out on that early Saturday morning, so I appreciate that very much. My name is Jay Banfield. I'm with Europe. I don't think my hands are that large. I think it's a weird kind of angle of the camera there. But anyway, just to give you a little sense of who I am, I started my career in the Valley at Oracle. I worked at Oracle for 6 years. And then I worked in local government, so I worked with Heather and Patrick. Well, actually we didn't overlap too much, but spent time in municipal government for 8 years, and then made the switch to social entrepreneurship. I think as it relates to the comments that Skyra made at the beginning, I also grew up as an opportunity youth. I grew up in poverty as it relates to financial resources, but not in terms of love and support. And so that really, the combination of the multi-sector approach and my own personal background brings me to this work. What does Europe do? I mean, Heather, you talked about the projected 11 million people gap in terms of skills. And we see that coming down the road. We also know on this panel that there is a gap that's right in front of us. There are millions of jobs that are vacant right now in our economy. And companies across the country are struggling to find talent. So if you work for an employer, we've got 2 alums who work at Salesforce here from Europe. And we know that every company is struggling to find talent. And I get frustrated by that because there are millions of jobs that are open, people are struggling to find this, and I know how much talent that exists within our country. And so that is what we do, is we look at, in our case, we look at Opportunity Youth, the 6 million talented young adults between 18 and 24-year-olds who have motivation and talent but lack access and networks and opportunities to go realize their potential and to connect to those jobs. And so our job is to try to bring that together and create some kind of more efficient marketplace. And the way that we do that, and the principles that I think we try to apply and that I know providers are also working on, is true labor market attachment. Working with companies very closely to understand what are the skills and competencies that are necessary for success across lots of different dimensions of work. We then take that and translate that into a curriculum that maps to those jobs, because we want young adults to have real marketable skills when they leave the program after a year's time. We're also thinking about the importance of work-based learning experiences. If I think in our system writ large, there is not enough work-based learning that occurs at a high school, middle school, and post-secondary educational level. So we think about that a lot. And the importance of professional skills, that your hard skills are really important, but success often comes with how you navigate a professional setting. And much of the work that we do is dedicated towards helping young people navigate the complexity of a professional setting. And that is all in the context of wraparound support, because if we think about young people who are talented but are struggling with what we know are challenges in poverty and low income, that you need the resources and the support to be able to navigate that. And so our program is now 17 years old. We're in 25 different cities across the country. We've served more than 17,000 young people. And we've watched people like Marissa and Jelly go make phenomenal careers for themselves and to really influence not only their families but their communities. And so looking forward to the conversation, but I see there is a chasm now. It's only growing, and we need to come up with solutions that address those in the near term.
Focus on anything in particular?
Yeah, because the K4 Center is one of those unique organizations that's looking at and serving through nonprofit activities young people's needs for the right education piece, and also investing in entrepreneurs who are helping solve new problems. Maybe talk about more of the entrepreneurs and the creativity that's coming out of, you're seeing through K4 Enterprise and the investment side.
Right, yeah. So good morning again, and thanks for waking up. I know I'm usually asleep at this time. And it's an honor to be on the panel with such great folks. I feel like oftentimes in the social impact world, you feel like you're alone in the struggle, so anytime you can be surrounded by your peers is always a great Great, thanks. So my name is Lilian Novapori. I am a principal at Cooper Capital, our seed stage venture fund. But as Heather mentioned, we're part of the larger K-Port ecosystem called the K-Port Center. On the nonprofit side, we have the Level Playing Field Institute, which runs the Summer Math and Science Academy, which takes low-income youth from diverse backgrounds and trains them up for starting from their freshman year in high school all the way to the senior year, focusing on STEM education. So they have the chance to go to college campuses and participate in a 9-week summer program and help them build up their STEM talent. On the K-Port Capital side, workforce is actually a really big area that we've kind of doubled down on in the past, I would say 2 years. One, through our investments, we've made a lot of investments in a sector my boss likes to call POT, or People Operations Tech, not the kind you smoke, the other and so what has made up that sector is not only alternative learning programs such as code academies or just boot camps, but also alternative ways to source talent like labor eds, and also ways to get bias. I think the memorable thing that Frida K-Port College says all the time is like, working at Google is not a skill. It's just a line on your resume. And so how do you get people who are hiring out of saying like, oh, I just want someone who works at Google, and trying to get them to realize what it is they actually are looking for in candidates. And the investments we've made in POT kind of help take the bias out of that, out of the name brand hiring, if you may. And so I'll plug, we are hosting our third People Operations Tech competition in December. So if you have an HR idea, even an idea stage or a company, we are giving away, I think we just increased the prize money up to $100,000 on December 7th. If you go on our website, you can see, apply, and just for after a pitch, you get, the potential win up to $100K. So it's a pretty good deal. And then on the investment side of things, I think we have a unique opportunity as a venture capital to influence a large group of companies. So we have companies in our portfolio everywhere from Uber, which is, a couple thousand people, all the way to, we just invested in a company that is 3 people. But starting at the seed stage is really about the culture building and influencing how they hire. And so we do that through a couple different ways. One is our founders commitment, which is getting our founders who we invest in to commit to hiring a diverse staff that represents the communities in which they serve. And then secondly, it's through a couple of different workshops that we host every year for them about looking at alternative strategies for hiring and not just focusing on the same hiring strategies that everyone does, like going to the top 10 schools and trying to get talent that way. We also bring in we are investors in code academies, and we bring in graduates from those schools as part of a talent network as a way of recruiting for our own portfolio companies. So it's kind of, I don't know, I feel like people say it's a pipeline problem. We try to approach all the different parts of the pipeline. And then at the end of it, I think that retention is key for us as well. What we were finding was a lot of graduates from alternative programs were getting the jobs, but they weren't necessarily staying there. So what we've tried to do to address that, as well as hooking them up with mentors who are in their current careers, and so peer peers, as well as further on sponsors who can help them advance in careers. And we've seen a lot more retention through that program as well.
Thank you so much. I know that we're going to come to the point where there's so much that our panelists could share. Any one of these individuals could certainly have this whole session on their own. So what I'm going to do is I have one kind of burning question that I'm going to pose to people, and you guys can kind of pick off what you want with that. And then I'm going to ask you all to think in the meantime about what are your burning questions, and we'll open it up to you all. So what I would ask my esteemed colleagues is, for what you know works today, one or two of the ways you could go with this. A, how do we scale what absolutely is going to help people, get on the other end of this huge kind kind of talent divide and opportunity divide. And so what works, and or how do we scale what works? Because that's the other thing that is hard for me when I see things that really are making the difference. It's not enough, especially when we keep thinking that there are going to be more and more people on the bad end of this. So how do we, what do you see at a systems level that could really make the difference?
So I think there's two big opportunities that I see at least directly. The first, and I think Jay touched on it, is more work-based learning. And what we've developed through federal investment from the Department of Labor is apprenticeship in tech program.
Right.
And our goal there is to, over the next few years, connect just 300 individuals to apprenticeships in web development and cybersecurity, along with City College. And this particular model has a really great way to bring more equity, to bring more diversity and inclusion into tech. The Tech SF initiative overall, we have representation of about 13% African American and 18% Latino and 50% women, and that's compared to 2%, I think, when you look at the tech industry for African American representation, 6% for Latino representation, and 32% for women. Mm-hmm. So it's a huge opportunity to providing these apprenticeship opportunities to close that gap. And obviously, if you have private sector investment, it's very scalable. And so I think that's what we're looking into, the sustainability of these apprenticeship efforts. When we develop a model, apprenticeships have historically been in the trades, and this is wholly new to the industry. It's wholly new to educators, and so getting what I found is just getting people to understand the impact of it and not feel threatened by apprenticeship, which I think we're all on the same. I assume everyone's on the same page here, but that's a real thing. People feel threatened by innovative programs, and there's a lot that we can do as a group, I think, to talk about more of these models, to bring in best practices, and to say, actually this works, and to get industry involved in champions to really talk about it is key. I would say this, just the second opportunity for scale is in education. So the city has Free City, so a $5 million investment each year, so that residents of San Francisco can go to the community college. The individuals who are going into community college have a great opportunity once they graduate to take advantage of these jobs, to address that 11 million job shortfall. And TechSF is working with the Stanford Human Capital Project on looking at ways in which we can tap the community colleges in the region, as well as alternative strategies in online learning, in grassroots community-based organization training, to figure out how we can leverage all these resources and provide guided pathways for individuals to go into tech. And the goal is to look at data, to look at what is driving persistence, what is driving outcomes at all these institutions, and see if there's a framework that works in tech. And if we solve tech, we can apply it to healthcare, we can apply it to other industries, and that's where I think we'll see scale and we'll see a lot of impact. So that's two things that we're doing.
Great, thank you. Jay, yeah, I was going to say, just to build on that, because you guys have been working with employers for 17 years. So what's the key to really scaling that?
If I think about the question of scale, I think about the fact that we have a broken talent marketplace.
Okay.
And so we need to think about the marketplace and the ecosystem that we need to create within the country. And if you think about it from that perspective, there are different players and different strategies that you can employ. First, I would say, is on the employer side, we need to change perceptions that exist within the country. We just need to do that. If you think about a four-year degree as a proxy for ability and talent in our country, it is a proxy and it is effective for some jobs, but not all. And I would argue that we over-apply that proxy because we don't have other alternatives to employ. And so if I think about that as a limiting factor, and if you would put a four-year degree requirement on every job, you immediately eliminate 65% of the population generally. And so 35% of Americans over 25 have a four-year degree. But then you disproportionately affect people of color. And so if you're thinking about diversity issues, the fact that we put that proxy up there it just doesn't make any sense. I love the quote of, Google's not a skill. No offense to people who are in Google here. I absolutely agree with it. If the data is clear that we're a part of this initiative called 7-second resumes, is that on average, an HR professional spends 7 seconds looking at a resume. And if they do that, guess what they're looking at? They're looking at what degree and where you work. Again, can be effective for some jobs, but I know for a fact that eliminates a vast majority of talent that exists in our country. So we've got to fix that on the private side. We've got to think about those issues. I also think about the employers is that when employers, you ask for a job description for employers, you'll find 25, 30 things. And I've been guilty of this in hiring. And if you sit down and ask them, what are you really looking for? I need these 4 things. So if you think about the confusion that creates in the marketplace, if every employer is sending out too many signals and you multiply that by millions of jobs, you get chaos in the marketplace and the signals are just not clear. And so that means it creates confusion from the workforce development providers and from education. So then what are we responding to? How do we respond to it? Now look, as a workforce development provider, we need to be more nimble. So our educational systems have to be more responsive to what the labor market is asking for. We have to be able to understand what those signals are and then quickly develop curriculum maps to jobs. So the attachment to jobs needs to be something that education really embraces. I think we need to name that. And then if I think about the public sector and what Patrick is doing with Tech SF is that governments need to facilitate the creation of that ecosystem. We need to bring together the different sectors. If I think about the most complex issues that face us as a country, they require all the sectors working together. And so my answer to that, Heather, would be we've got to think about it as a broken marketplace. We have to recreate the marketplace. We need to recreate the ecosystem. It needs to be about changing perceptions. It needs to be more nimble delivery of curriculum. It needs to recognize the importance of work-based learning, as Patrick talked about. It also needs to recognize the importance of soft skills and the networks that we all use to build careers. And that's kind of the hidden thing here is that the networks that you have create the job opportunities. And let's just name that. That's true. And so how is it, as a system, we increase the networking capabilities for talented young people across our country?
We talk about credentials and we talk about skills acquisition. We also recognize, and it's kind of I feel a schizophrenic situation, we also recognize that it really isn't any one hard or functional skill that is the answer to the test because everything is changing so quickly. It's the ability to learn new skills and apply them to the right problems. Is there such a thing as kind of future-proofing your skill set or your talent?
When we go out and hire, I lead our summer associate program. A big thing that we're looking for is the eagerness to learn. Yeah. And so a lot of times, we specifically look for our summer associate program for people who have no venture capital experience at all. But the folks who have been the most successful in the program historically have those who have just been really excited to learn and have just kind of digested everything that has come their way. And for us, I think we're even guilty of setting, before it used to be you have to be going into an MBA program and you had to be going into the top 25 MBA program. And we had these always, a whole list of skills, as Jay mentioned. And so what we had to do for this past year, we actually used one of our own companies, Talent Sonar, which analyzes your job description and it helps identify any bias or gendered language that you may be using or anything that may eliminate a huge portion of the population. I think that not only on looking at who doesn't have a college degree, but also how women apply. I mean, I think time after time, studies have showed that women only apply to jobs where they meet like 90% of the skills that are there. So if we're putting this whole list, we're probably eliminating a huge portion of women as well as people of color and others. So for us, we have, really looked at how we've done that and kind of utilized the same skills that we look for when we're looking at companies to invest in and founders at companies. Like, what is really important there? It's that passion, and we're like, who's scrappy? So who is going to, in a pinch, work hard to find the solution, and why are we not applying that same thing to the jobs that we hire for? And I think once we open that up, the talent that we've seen this year, I think was our record year. So we got 700 applications for our summer associate program. So it increased by, I believe, like 600%. And the quality, this was by far the best year. And we had folks in the program who weren't pursuing their MBA, and they held their own with the other folks.
Wow, very great. Okay, clearly I could keep asking the panel all kinds of questions, but what do you all, do you have burning questions?
Yes, I'm sorry. No, that's okay. I just, on the scaling question.
Yeah.
As a company, so we practice something called beneficial employment. We are in support of ban-the-box, ban-the-degree, and open hiring even. We are a heavily regulated company as a bank, so we are constrained in part by that. But at a minimum, beneficial employment gets at the problem of underemployment as well as unemployment. We pay 150% of living wage in all markets, fully benefited, no part-time work. And that's a really important commitment for corporations to make. We are not holding business to a high enough standard, and they are contributing to a devastating trend of lack of ability to really sustain a livelihood or a household. We also talked about our practices around diversity, but when this problem is hard to solve, we tend to try to make it bigger. Open the aperture of the camera so more comes into view that could be a source or an interdependency or a dynamic that we have to get at in order to solve the underlying problem we most care about. So I'll just say this is a few pieces of an agenda that we pursue. It's non-standard in the sense that most companies wouldn't be thinking about these issues, but we need all companies to be thinking about them. And it needs to move from being an agenda to overlapping campaigns. So we are very supportive of free college now. That doesn't mean free the colleges, that means provide free college for everybody. And the community college system is awesome. It hosts 2.4 million students in California. It is the dominant provider of education. We should make that education free and allow Pell Grants and other support to redound to living expenses, because this is hard to do. We are in favor of a fair chance economy, where the kindergarten and college promise is in every public school. We don't have enough opportunity to weigh in on educational equity. We have to rely on others, but we can support as corporations accelerated savings mechanisms, mentoring, even the behavioral economics around kindergarten and college, that once you're saving for college, you simply have a much higher chance of actually getting there and getting through. We are very intent on decoupling wealth building from the housing choice. The income disparity is shocking in this country. The wealth disparity is much more important. We do not have assets in the hands of the people who need them or in the communities that deserve them. And the housing deduction is inaccessible to most people now. When we look at how we underwrite mortgages, we used to have these standards of, only 30% or 35% of your income should go to your housing costs. That's right out the window now. These emerald cities, nobody can afford to spend less than maybe 60% of their income. So the thought that we're going to all build wealth through housing is no longer realistic. We need to create more community vehicles for wealth building. We're very supportive of models like the community reinvestment, community REIT, where small dollar transactors can actually invest in the assets where they work, sleep, and eat. Do we just have to find a way for people to have more assets? Guaranteed resources, we're heavy into the economic security working groups talking about universal basic income. Desperation is way too expensive for us. It was a big driver in this last election, and that was just the current wave of people who are feeling desperate. It relates to another thing that we really need to get at, which is owning and correcting our own history. We have not reckoned with the fact that this country was founded on slavery, native genocide, and less than personhood for more than half the people. And until we do that, we're going to have false notions of when the race started and who's at the starting line. Then also, obviously, I run a bank, so the bank is the hammer for us. But lending is a really powerful tool in this country. Banking is a quasi-public system. It's the place where we crowdfund most powerfully. It's not that a single deposit funds a single loan, but all deposits fund a lending practice, and there's $12 trillion of our deposits rattling around in the American economy alone. When we lose our agency and accountability for what that deposit funding is lending to, we participate in our own demise. We are literally allowing our money while it sleeps in banks overnight fund private prisons, Dakota Access Pipeline, non-renewable mining and oil and gas, etc. So we need to take back our banking system. I think we need to treat every problem in the labor markets the way we're hopefully going to treat the gender gap. Not measure for and not tolerate any gaps, not in pay, not in access. We need to participate every way we possibly can in ending mass incarceration, which is just the most recent manifestation of a racial caste system. We can't overcome the damage that does to individuals, families, and communities. And we should treat addiction like the health epidemic that it is, not like a crime. We need a new national and global vision, and we can do it. We've done it in the past, but we have to call out a proactive vision of the world we actually want to live in and then drive towards it. We're trying to launch something called the Overlap Mapping Project. We're working with these incredible open source databases that are in the public domain to simply map where the capital assets, transportation infrastructure, and job base of the old industries that we can no longer afford, the non-renewable ones like conventional timber, textile, paper, oil, gas, mining, etc. Map those resource bases and then overlay on that where are the renewable industries likely able to go capitalize on those existing capital assets, transportation infrastructure, and job bases. We don't all need to cram into the emerald cities. Fresno, Spokane, Roseburg can be wonderful places to live. They can actually recruit talent better if we create vital, resilient, local living economies in those places. And it's a massive sorting and planning project that any parent could probably do in their spare time. So let's just get at it.
You know, you just talked about the sort of the overlay of all the different major policies that have to work together to really make systemic change. And how do we inspire business leaders who are mostly charged with the success of their companies and thinking about this kind of greater good? And how do we motivate them to work together to solve these systemic problems?
I'll take a quick swipe at that, but I'm sure that my panel colleagues have better ideas too. So we have to release companies from the horrible grips of the capital markets. There is just no way around how bad short-termism and free riding and prisoner dilemmas and externalities and everything the capital markets promote and lock in place. We're very interested in new corporate models that free decision-making from that kind of self-interested short-termism. I'm thrilled that a lot of new companies are resisting IPOs and staying private and trying to lock in foundational documents, be they B corporations or perpetual trusts or whatever, so that they can make decisions in the public benefit as well as their own personal gain. I'm not eschewing ambition and innovation and profit making and anything like that, but for goodness sakes, we have to hold business to a much higher standard. It cannot just maraud around and trash the place.
And how we hold them accountable to that bigger picture.
It's going to be hard to do because the capital markets are pretty dialed in.
Yeah.
So I favor culture. That as a culture, we have to insist on this, and we do have levers. You can change where you bank. You can change what you buy. You can change where you'll go to work. You can agitate from within. I really think we are still social animals, and we don't tolerate either exile or shame well. It's life-threatening to us. So let's hold everybody accountable. Let's take back our agency and accountability for these big systems.
Wow. Okay, well, that is so inspiring, Kat. Thank you very much, because I feel like that's just truth-telling at the highest level. So we are running short on time, but I want to see, does anybody have one burning question we can kind of close out the session with? Go for it.
Yeah, so this is a question for Jay. So I really like your answer about kind of marketplaces as a solution for scalability. And it's really impressive what Europe has done in the past 17 years. What I'm wondering is, how does that work in practice from a matching standpoint with like a massive marketplace? Because one of the biggest challenges for a lot of different companies to work with apprenticeship programs or even hire talent that has non-traditional backgrounds is not having an assessment framework that they can rely on that's trusted. So I wonder how you guys have tackled that and how you're thinking about that for the future.
Yeah, no, first of all, I really appreciate that question, and we're thinking a lot about that because that is, if I had a magic wand, if you could create an eBay for talent and thinking about a much more efficient way of matching talent to opportunity at massive scale is what the country needs. So I wrote down talent sonar. I'm thinking about that as an issue. Is that how is it that we use machine learning and artificial intelligence to accumulate all of the requirements that we see in the labor market? Because the problem is if you deal with it on an individual job basis and an individual company basis, it's incredibly hard to see the trends. So how is it that we can feed all that information into some massive database, look at through big data and machine learning to figure out what are the common characteristics for different job categories? That would create much more clear signals within the marketplace for people to respond to. And then there's a responsibility on the provider side of understanding what it is that Europe is good at doing versus other organizations. And so there is a signaling problem on the other side, on the provider side, that we need to sort through as well. And we need to be accountable. So we need to have self-referential and self-correcting system that says, here are the skills that we're looking for at a competency skill level. And then here are the organizations, the community colleges, the nonprofit providers who are very well equipped to map to those jobs. And then let's scale those things that work. Part of the problem is you have maybe a nonprofit trying to bite off more than they can chew, or a community college trying to address all these different sector approaches. How is it that we have limited resources in our country and we have to target them to where they're most effective so that we maximize the benefit and utility for the country? And so it's very much on my mind. I wish I had a solution to it, but I think there's a role for technology, for AI, for machine learning, and I really want to think about how do we solve that, create that marketplace.
I think we still can fit in time for your questions, sir. So.
Yeah, so for the panelists, you guys have a group of young professionals or tenured professionals in this room. We're all trying to tackle certain things, but what can they do or what can we do within our organizations as we grow and become the next leaders of our organizations to shape what we're trying to achieve in this session?
Well, I would say I think everybody's path and journey is unique and different. I don't know that I can sort of set up a generalized set of guidances for folks. I think as Iskaida started the morning just talking about the power of mentorship, of people who really understand your similar passions, your similar kind of missions, and try to help you kind of realize and achieve what you set out to do is very helpful. I've found to just have peers who can support me and help keep me on my path and keep me motivated and energized to do the work is probably one thing you can do, is to make sure you have relationships with people who are also like-minded and trying to do something similar. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would also say, I personally, I'm a venture capitalist, so I believe in capitalism. I don't think capitalism is bad. And so I feel like you, as a professional, you are participating in the capitalist system, I think. But you have power in everything you do and how you spend your dollars and how you even vote with your talent, where you choose to go. By choosing to go to organizations that are doing well, I think that shows a lot, because that's usually the biggest problem, is that these organizations who are trying to do good have just a hard enough time recruiting talent as well. And then if you do choose to participate from the investor side of things, I think making sure that your investments, even as a personal investor, I mean, I'm sure you have a 401k or some other investment vehicle, but making sure that that money is going to organizations you believe in. I mean, at Caper Capital, I mean, we were an investor in Uber. We saw that as a part of our social responsibility was to address the issues that were going on there. So our two partners wrote a letter to the Uber board and said, hey, we don't feel comfortable with what's going on there, and we hope that made some change. And a bunch of people on the writer level, you know, divested from Uber, chose to not take it anymore because they didn't agree with the practices there. So I believe every action that you take, like when you go grab coffee today, you know, where you choose to get your coffee can help make a difference. And if you're supporting companies that are supporting Europe and, you know, Tech San Francisco, then that is a way that you support the whole ecosystem. And it's not just like, you know, when you grow up and become a venture capitalist that, you know, you have all the power.
Excellent. Yeah. Yes, you want to say? Oh, no, I'm good. You go ahead.
Okay. Thank you all. I just want to make sure we keep running on time. I want to give a round of applause for the amazing panel.